Square in the harbour, was just buses nose to tail. And Sandy Kelly had a pony and a donkey, and he would let you walk for him. And he had a speech impediment, but his cry was he dee a ride. It wasn't he threepence, it was he dee. And that's what you charged. But the Wilcox family thought, hey boy, that's a quart trick. We'll get you in. So they went to the gypsies and they bought a donkey. And they had a wee cart in the old farm, and they thought they put wee seats on it, made it like a jaunting car. He says we can take 6 wains across, back and forth, threepence each. So they went down to the shore, but they didn't know anything about the birds and bees, you see. Their donkey was a Jack, and Sandy's donkey was a Jenny. And the next thing, the Jack's ears went down the back of its neck and its teeth get bared. And the next thing, all it was seen was the cart, was the wheels. It must have been a bit, the Wallace's ropes. The cart was smashed in bits, and the wains around screaming, waving and everything. Roy Reid meanwhile like hell out of the road. And they never went back. I don't know what happened to the donkey or anything. They never went back near the shore. I think Sandy claimed the donkey after that. But it was a wrecked place. But God, there was hundreds of them there, you know. Even there when the picture house was going. Remember the Mid-Hours cinema? It was at the start. And, well, they had it was a toilet, but it wasn't really a toilet. But you'd been sitting there and we had a good, exciting picture on, and you're sitting watching the guys here. When you go to the toilet, and the next thing you hear somebody yell, lift your feet. It'll be trickle around your feet to the front door. Boy, that was some place. And Walter McCrea, a big watty, he was a wonderful character too. But anybody's known, you would remember Walter, Watty McCready, always naked. Walter. And what happened that was, he fell off a push bike in front of the butcher's shop. And when they went over to get him up, he had brown paper wrapped in vinegar. That was an old trick in the winter. He had brown paper wrapped in vinegar, and they kept him going and laughed at him that much. He started that nonsense, coming up in the middle of the winter, he had the shirt open right down. And when you put your hand on his stomach, it was like putting your hand in front of a fire. It was. But the last time I was in his company, I was doing it. His young fellow was here at the time he died, unfortunately. Lived at just down at the foot of the town there, near Gunnan's shop, as it was. And I went down, we're sitting yarning, young Walter and old Walter and me. And then old Walter said, what way's the ship? Because that dictated what the way the tide was. You know, the mast, when it was yon way, towards Donaghadee it was coming in, and towards Ballyhelbert it was going out. And young Walter comes in, he says, it's on the ebb now. Right, he says. He went to the back and he appeared in with a big bucket in the newspaper over the top to get it into the tide so the tide would carry it out. But there was them wee houses there at, they're no there now. There used to be Billy Latimer's shop, you know, at the Smithy Hill there. And that was Billy's shop. But there was 2 wee houses, or they were big houses. And the Belfast folk used to stay in there. And one of them married Alan McKay. And I hadn't seen him all these years. And after Ivy died, I went to the funeral. And Alan by this time was dead. But this way, the girl he married, Margaret, was there. I says, do you remember me? She says, I do. She says, do you remember the bucket? I said, I do. They were clearing up to go away for her on Sunday. She ran across and the handle broke in the middle of the hill. And all that washed in the hill, and the folk were coming up to go to church. But I tell you what I found out, Patrick. Who it was attacked by the monkey. After all these years, was Mary Brannan. Mary was coming down. It was David. The preachers lived in there then. I didn't know that at that time. But he says, Mary come down the street with her hat on to go to church. And there was imitation fruit on it. Well, the monkey out through the door and landed in Mary's head and trailed the hat of her head or sent her screaming up the street. And Davy says, she come down the next week and she says, look on that window and see what that old monkey is. So he says, it's all right, it's tight to the crook. And he says, Mary went down, looked in the window, and then, yeah, at the monkey, and then went on to church again. But the Reverend, or Canon, we want to call him, he's a strict sort of a being, wasn't he? Reverend Jackson. Remember, Dora McCulloch had 3 sons, and she christened them the Pope, Goebbels, and Hess. That's where they all got them names. The Pope was christened by Dora herself. But Pope, when he got a lot of drink at him, would have been sort of ill with his mother. And he come up and he'd been given us wanting more money for drink, and he had pushed the mother. Well, unfortunately for him, Reverend Jackson, who at one time had been middleweight champion of Ireland as a boxer, gave him a scalp, knocked him down. And I went into Sam Fowler, and Sam was killing himself laughing. He says, and he wrote the article for the Spectator at that time. He says, you know what I'm putting the jottings this week? Say what? Local vicar fells the Pope. I don't think you'll get away with that, you know. But there was one man, I don't think he has any relations here. He made arrangements. The woman was in the advanced stages of pregnancy, and arrangements were made for the wedding. But the man never turned up. So the child was born, and a while later she was in a state of pregnancy again, and another wedding was arranged. Never turned up again. So he said to the woman, they were still in the Church of Ireland, you wait there. And he had a wee car at that time. And he went up to the boy's house, and he brought him up with a scruff of the neck, and set him in the car, drove him to church, stand there till the service is complete, and then do what you want. He had something, and that is a true story. But I was telling Tom coming down, there was a murder on the Well Road. And I found out about years later, it was left as an open verdict. And the woman, the end house of the 6 child houses, Victor, where Earl Moore lives, was in there. There was a woman in the end house in there where was Ian Butler lived in the end house in the other end, the 4 houses. They lived in there, but she had a speech impediment. And the Waynes would have kept her going. She was deaf and had a speech impediment with your voice. And she did a silly thing. She chased the Waynes into their house, and she got hiding in the house. They said she was had a pan or something. But anyway, she came back to her house and she died about 5 days later. But it was an open verdict returned. They got the husband conned into a lot of drink to say that she'd fell in the steps outside. But and I often wondered, but I didn't even know about it. But I was talking. Well, she was my auntie, but she was only a wee lass there, and she said she was sitting on the dyke at the top of the garden when the woman ran out with the blood running down her face. She had seen it. And I remember Ellie Gunnan telling me, he's a wonderful character too, I forgot about him. he said he remembered the detectives coming in this big sedan. He sat with the big long black coats and the soft hats on, getting statements for the World Row. I'm sure they were comic. But you get some first statements about them, especially when big Andy Jeffrey or their old man was virtually blind, and he sold insurance. And you get him a coin, he just rubbed it between his finger and thumb, and he could tell you what it was. It was a halfpenny, a farth, and a penny, or whatever. He could tell them that. They lost his sight apparently in the lime kilns. I know it's not going to be opened, I think it was, but that was the last place Gordon White told me about it. He said, see in the winter when the lime was burned, he says that fire burnt for about 36 hours. They put coal and sticks, and then the big blocks of lime, lit it, and it burned. And he says, you'd have seen all the old folk coming up the street with their chairs to sit around the fire. The winter. I remember them coming to the threshing mills. You'd been raking the chaff back from below, and you'd seen the elders for the fiddle of the tune coming up with the old empty tick, as they called it, filling it with chaff. Gordon says, great, boy. He says, 3 weeks were really comfortable, then they got kind of hard. But yeah, you had 2 or 3 ticks with you, and so you had to change a chaff. I mean, you only bother doing it again, you would have got a miss in you. But big Robert Warnick, he was his mill then. Boy, he was dog rough altogether. Did you ever see him at all, David? This day, Robert. Old Robert. He was. We were working. He got the television set on. Never forget it. And we were gathering spuds for him in the field behind the house. Out he come. Only you boys want to see this football match. Well, there was a swear word between every word. And Sandy says, they're looking on there. Well, I'm no playing they such and such a field when they such and such a tractor. They see this such and such a match. And the curses and swear. And he took us in and see this match. And you thought it was snowing. It was a black and white set and all these white marks coming down. You couldn't tell anything of the match at all. But he took us in there anyway. And then we were out in the back. He did a bit of work. And somebody left a car up to get done something. They had a pit then, and they had to get in below it. And there was an explosion. Louis had got in below it with a welder, and the tank was half full of petrol. He blew the whole back end out of the boy's car. Robert had to get him another car. But my dad said his party, he raced bikes. He actually did race motorbikes in McGilligan Strand. And the fella, his mate, got killed. He crashed, and Robert never went back to the racing again. But my dad said he used to go and watch him. When he worked on the bikes, he had a big plank up to the, where he could sit away. He was on the yard in the bike, and he rode it up the plank and stopped it on top of the desk and worked away at the bike there. And the only thing that had left I was asking Louis one day, the only thing he had left was the number plate of the bike. But I would like to get on the road home when he was riding a bike around. If he rode a bike like he farmed. He used to curse and swear at Jackson something desperate, because Jackson had a wee farm. Remember, he had 2 or 3 cows and a couple of hens, and he said, you should have been this kind of a farmer and known this kind of a minister. Jackson just looked, terrible man. There's no sense arguing with Robert. Well, listen, folks, that's about as much as I can do. Something might come to my head as I'm sitting here, but I tell you, have you ever got them? They didn't do that now, does it? There's no way in sales of wasps now at all. That was the only way we really made money, New Year's Eve. At the road, and the wasps there, and away you went. But John discovered a great trick. John Cromie, God help me, he's dead now. He went into the toilet they built, and he realised when you went into the toilet, you could reach your hand out through the window and get empty porter bottles. So he lifted 2 empty porter bottles, took them into Woodman the next day and got a penny apiece for them. He got the same 2 bottles the next night. He didn't go in every night, but once a week maybe. You'd have got maybe 2, 3 bottles, but a penny a time, and 6 was got you into the pictures. And then Dora would have come round with a torch selling ice cream, and she got a halfpenny for every ice cream, and you'd have said, hey, no money. And what? I thought Robert Warney could curse till you wouldn't buy an ice cream of Dora. the last Aunt Nora Johnson, who was Nora Blair, my ma's cousin, she was the woman that was sent for when they were waiting on you. You know, if you were in bed and Nora come into the bedroom, you weren't long for this world, I'm telling you. But what she carried with her in her handbag was a wee bit of mirror to put below your nose, and a wee cloth to tie your chin up to make sure you're away. But I'd heard the story, and I asked my ma, was it true? And she said it was. When you died upstairs in them outhouses up there, you had to be brought downstairs to the good room to be laid out. But this woman had expired upstairs, and Nora hadn't got there in time, and she couldn't get her clothes right. And she was looking around for some, because she hadn't her accoutrements with her. And on the top of the wardrobe was the cardboard box. She lifted it down with a gas mask in it. So she put the gas mask on the woman, pulled the strap to get it up. Then they got her on a chair, and they were going down the stairs, and Dr. Houston came through the door. They were coming with a corpse in a chair and a gas mask on. But the last time I seen her, Old Huey, he was a great old character. He always did the service every year at the War Memorial. He was brilliant. He actually looked and sounded like Churchill, and he had a bowler hat. He did the business. He was in the Submariner during the First World War. But Nora came in, and she said, well, come on to my ma, where they were cousins. Eggy, I didn't know what I'm going to do with that old man. He's doting. I say, what? She says, he brought me in them big rugs with a tiger scene on it. You know, they brought them before in India or Germany. And this tiger scene with the jungle and all. She says, I woke up this morning, he's sitting on the end of the bed in his pyjamas with his bowler hat and his boots on, and a shotgun over his shoulder, or over his arm, and he says, when that bloody dog goes, I'll put an end to it. But the last man, she didn't insult him as such, but most of us knew my ma. She was a fairly decent baker, you know. And, you know, when you went for cigarettes or lemonade, you went to Albert's. If you went for bread, you went to Aggie's. But before she had the shop, she would have baked in the house and didn't sell it, just give it to neighbours that come and friends. And the one man, as soon as she put the griddle on, the first man through the door was the Reverend Hearn. And he was in for a soda for and a cup of tea. But if Nora came up here and then, he was just away, and my ma says, that old man is my heart broke. Every minute I put that griddle on, I'll put an end to that, she says. So the Reverend Hearn, she watched for him the next week up with him, and then So Nora and then sat just opposite him, crossed the big legs right away up. She had these big black knickers on her knees, and she had them way pulled up as high as she could on the big backside. And Hearn was looking at the ceiling and looking everywhere but not there. And finally he went out, and then for that on, as soon as he came up the road, she seen him. "You going up the Aggies, your Reverend?" "Oh no, I've another message to do." Well, he come near if Nora saw him. But she was something special, tell you. But I think I really think that was where we got the sense of humour for that side of the Blairs, because there was something evil about them. They could see humour in the worst of things. But there you are, folks. That's an odd wee story. But I'm sure when I sit here, something else will come into my head. But that's it.